ladies and gentlemen. My name is Hana Nurain binti Harun. My matrix number is 273289. Now, you have heard of the name Kim Namjoon before, but what is that to Kim Namjoon other than being just a member of BTS? To those of you who is unsure of who Kim Namjoon is, he is actually the leader of the group BTS. Due to, rationally speaking, being a part of one of the biggest boy band in the world currently, it's been noted by many that this man seems like a brilliant one. With his in-depth thinking and views on societal and mental issues, his 164 Conca credits, as well as the fact that he had successfully given a formal speech at the reputable United Nations conference, leaves him very much respected. But not many actually knows that his apparent intelligence actually stems from the fact that he has an IQ score of 148. IQ can be described as a set of tests designed to assess human intelligence. The result from an IQ test can be affected by many factors. Average score for a normal person would be around 100, but with Joon having an IQ score of 148, it is undeniably to say that he is in fact an intellectual. Assalamualaikum and a very good afternoon to Madam Nurul Akmal and everyone watching. Today, I would like to talk about how having an IQ score of 148 have impacted the life of Joon, both his victories and his struggles. First, let's dive into the boons of having a high IQ score for Joon. First of all, obviously, his high IQ score contributed to his linguistic skills. For those of you who's not very familiar with them, Joon actually picked up both English and Japanese naturally, making him trilingual. Joon explains the reason behind his fluency is partly due to his mom forcing him to watch Friends when he was younger. In the early 2000s, it was cliche for Korean parents to be forcing their kids to watch Friends, and Joon's mom happens to be one of those parents. But rather than forcing her son per se, she actually allows him to watch the dubbed Korean version first with the English subtitles, which helped to pique his interest for the show. And then he went on to watch the show a couple more times, fully in English. Although his linguistic skills is fantastic, many seems to think that he means that he is absolutely fluent in it. But in my opinion, I have to say that his proficiency in English is actually a bit overhyped and he is yet to be completely fluent in it. Based on my observation, Joon sounds wise, thoughtful, and very gentle whenever he's speaking or delivering a message in Korean. But unfortunately, some of the warmth and thoughtfulness doesn't always manage to transcend whenever he is speaking in English. For example, when the group was touring in London back in 2018, Joon was actually very heavily criticized by a reporter from the Times. The reporter stated in the article that Joon's use of English gives off the resemblance of Joey rather than Chandler. And knowing that Joon picks up his English watching Friends, the reporter was actually taking a jab at Joon by saying that his English resembles Joey, the slightly dim-witted character, compared to Chandler, who is the smarter one in the TV show. Now, on to the second point, his artistry and his intricate lyricism. As per mentioned before, Joon can be very wise and thoughtful when he wishes to be. Joon currently has 164 songs credited under his belt. His artistic side actually starts from writing poetry when he was in middle school, which then eventually turns to songwriting. Joon has been known to incorporate genius wordplays and insightful concepts onto his lyricisms. Reading through his discography, I have to say that his masterpieces brought me on a roller coaster journey. One of the most heartwarming yet mind-blowing pieces of his art he has written is actually on his solo track, Trivia Love, on the album Love Yourself Answer. On this track, he had written the line, "I was just a person, but you eroded my edges and turned me into love," as the chorus. As a typical English speaker, you might take the message behind this line as him finally being able to understand love upon meeting someone. But to truly understand the genius behind this line, we have to look at it from its Korean script. In Korean, the word person and love sounds very similar. Person is pronounced as saram, while love is saram. And both words in Korean share almost the same spelling, but the slight difference is at the ending, in which the word saram ends with a rectangle character with 4 sides, while the word sarang, love, ends with a rounded character, referring back to that chorus line that he wrote in which he said, "Meeting you eroded me from just a person, saram, to a love, to a saram, which means that the rectangle character at the end of saram is literally eroded into a rounded one which resembled the word sarang. Thus, meeting you eroded me from a person to love. Thirdly, his high IQ score also contributes to his hunger for knowledge. Despite having an IQ score of 148, he has an insatiable hunger when it comes to knowledge, and he has never shied away from changing his mind or admitting his wrongdoings. Joon's eagerness in gaining knowledge can actually be seen in his preference of art and the reading materials that he prefers. To illustrate an example, on February 2019, Joon reveals on a live broadcast a few of the art pieces that he owns in his studio room. One of the art pieces that he shows is specifically the Banksy's heart-shaped hole that is meant to support the Free Palestine movement. It has also been revealed that he owns multiple pieces that is pro-Palestine other than the Banksy one. Not only that, he also calls the country as Palestine rather than Israel. And for those of you who is not very familiar with the Israel-Palestine argument, South Korea is actually an extremely pro-Israel country, and so is the United States, the country that BTS tours the most. And the fact that Joon is knowledgeable and brave enough to address the issue on a live broadcast is absolutely mind-blowing to me. Unfortunately, though, as expected, he was very heavily criticized and scrutinized by the revelation of him owning pro-Palestine art pieces, and he receives major backlash from it. This revelation actually sparked huge debates among his fans, with his Zionist and Israeli fans calling him off of his bluff and telling him that he should keep his mouth shut about issues that he doesn't know anything about, while his Muslim, Palestinian and Palestine fans beaming at the revelation and being absolutely delighted by his support. But to me, being able to educate himself enough on a very politically heavy topic and being able to have a solid opinion that is different from others surrounding you is a sign that he is an absolute intellectual. However, with light there is always darkness. And now we shall move on to the bane of having a high IQ for Joon. Having a high IQ score also means that it comes with its own imperfections. For Joon though, he often sees things in too big of a picture. For someone who is very, very thirsty in his pursuit of knowledge, it is to be expected of him to see things as a whole picture rather than in details. Joon is actually a very meticulous person when it comes to his work, but it's not so much when it comes to his own life. For those who are not very familiar with BTS, Joon is actually known for his avid clumsiness, often overwhelmed with other things in mind. He tends to be very forgetful when it comes to simple things and often overlooked them. As an example, Joon has managed to lose his passport roughly 8 times while on camera while he was traveling and working overseas. At one point, while shooting a travel program called Bon Voyage, he actually had to go back to Korea mid-shooting because he lost his passport and he was unable to apply for an extended visa to enter the next country that they were supposed to travel to. Another interesting part of him that I have come to know is that he sometimes fails to understand the intricacy of simple things in life. It was revealed by Yoongi that Joon actually had not learned how to tie his shoelaces until he was finally in high school. And when asked why, Joon simply answered that he did not learn how to tie his shoelaces because he doesn't feel like he needs to before then. And for someone who has traveled a lot, especially in his line of work, there is also a footage of him being confused on how to unbuckle his own airplane seatbelt. Considering that BTS travels a lot, it baffles me that he still hasn't figured out how to unbuckle his own airplane seatbelt. In that footage, he had to ask Hobie, the member next to him, on instructions and demonstrations on how to unbuckle his own airplane seatbelt. Second, he also suffers from identity struggle. Even now, actually 7 years into his debut, Joon at times feel as if like he was putting up a front, especially whenever he is on interviews or so. On interviews though, especially the Western ones, it felt like as if he was putting on a persona. To be completely honest, Joon himself has actually admitted that RM to him is just a persona and it is different from his actual self. But to some people with a slightly more developed sense for others' emotions, though, they might feel a bit off from the energy that they sense from the persona that RM was putting on. But understanding the role that he has as the leader, Joon can actually be seen that way because he wants to maintain a high profile, especially for his team. But due to this front that he put up, he can sometimes come across as somewhat ingenuine and cocky. He seems to have a character shift, especially when he's speaking in English. He seems a bit more bold, he seems a bit more candid, and obviously a bit more confident. Thirdly, his IQ also made him very overly critical. Joon is actually a very hard-headed person and he is very logical. This actually often leads him to appear a bit more insensitive. He can be overly critical of both himself and those surrounding him. And he can have unrealistic expectations of certain situations. He can also seem somewhat passive-aggressive, especially when he is under pressure. Namjoon cares so much about maintaining a high profile that he can somehow appear a bit ingenuine to some people. But regardless of how high someone's IQ is, they are still human. Now, to sum it all up, no matter how smart we associated someone is, we have to remember that that person is still just a normal human being that also experiences emotions like us. We have to keep in mind that having a high IQ doesn't only equal the good things, but it also comes with its own struggles. And as humans, we all have our highs and our lows. And as BTS is a trained group, Joon was obviously brought up to have this idol persona, and he flaunts those whenever he was doing interviews. We will never truly understand or know them personally, but we can only assume. In the case of Joon, as RM, he is the perfect example of the male alpha. He's very charismatic and he's very confident. But off stage though, he is just Joon. And Joon actually is a very reserved person. Joon likes going to the park. Joon loves the nature. Joon loves his tiny crabs and tiny frogs. And Joon just seems like everything that RM is not. And those were the boons and banes of being unusually smart in the life of Kim Namjoon. Thank you.